Hey everyone, welcome. We're going to take a deep dive into quantum healing today.
Sounds exciting.
We'll be exploring Deepak Chopra's book, Quantum Healing.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one.
You probably know Chopra. He's a doctor who seems to bridge the gap, between conventional medicine and alternative healing.
I see what you mean.
The thing that really intrigued me is how he looks at the whole idea of the body's ability to heal itself through the lens of quantum physics.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a pretty bold claim.
It is.
So let's jump right in. What do you think is Chopra's main argument in the book?
Well, at its core, I think Chopra is saying that our bodies are way more intelligent than we give them credit for.
Okay.
And he isn't just talking about the amazing things our bodies just do naturally, automatically, like when we heal from a cut or digest food. He's suggesting there's this deeper intelligence at play, something beyond our current understanding.
I see. So like another level.
Yeah, exactly.
He uses some really interesting stories in the book to illustrate his points.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, for example, he talks about this young man in India who had advanced stomach cancer.
Okay.
And this man fully recovered after embracing traditional Ayurvedic practices.
Wow.
It makes you wonder, what if Western medicine is missing a big piece of the puzzle by not looking at the whole picture?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like maybe we're too focused on just treating symptoms.
And not the root cause.
Exactly.
Which is something Chopra emphasizes, right?
He does. He talks about how our current medical model misses this crucial connection between the mind and body.
Yeah, it's all interconnected.
He uses the example of Chitra, a breast cancer patient, to really drive this point home.
What happened to her?
She decided not to do conventional treatment.
Really?
Instead, she chose to explore Ayurvedic herbs, meditation, things like that, mental techniques.
Interesting.
And Chopra really highlights how important Ayurveda believes deep relaxation is as a foundation for healing.
Right. So it's not just about the physical treatments.
It's about the whole person, their mental state, too.
I like that.
It's pretty fascinating stuff. I mean, these stories, like Itra's, make you wonder, what if our bodies actually have this innate ability to heal that we just haven't fully tapped into?
Right. Like it's there, but we just need to figure out how to activate it.
Exactly.
But, it's important to remember that not all mind-body therapies have had, the same level of success. Yeah, that's true. Chopra talks about the skepticism surrounding certain therapies, like Dr. Simonton's visualization therapy,
Right.
which hasn't always shown the results people hoped for.
Interesting. But then he talks about cases where people have experienced spontaneous healing even when doctors didn't expect it.
Oh, I know what you mean. He mentions that story about the doctor who diagnosed a patient with a brain tumor, right?
Yes. And then later, the tumor was completely gone without any medical intervention.
It's remarkable. Makes you wonder just how powerful the mind really is.
Yeah, like it has this direct line to the body and can actually shape its reality.
It's a fascinating concept.
And that leads us to another key idea in the book, which
As
is our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, they actually have a real tangible effect on our physical health.
Oh, I completely agree with that.
Think about it. We've all felt the physical effects of stress.
100%. Stress can manifest in so many ways.
Chopra delves into how chronic stress actually weakens your immune system.
Oh, wow.
And then that can manifest into physical ailments.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect.
He even brings up those personality studies, like type A versus type B.
Right.
And how different personality traits seem to correlate with different health outcomes.
So interesting.
Like your personality might actually have a connection to your health.
It makes you think.
And it gets even more granular than that. He discusses the dopamine connection in schizophrenia.
Okay.
And how things like diet could potentially impact mental health.
It really highlights how interconnected our minds and bodies truly are.
Amazing, right?
It is.
All this stuff just working together.
A complex system.
This is where things get really interesting for me.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
Chopra goes deep into this whole idea of memory. And he suggests that it might not be solely confined to the brain.
What do you mean?
Like, he thinks that memory could exist at a cellular level.
Wow.
He even shares this case study of a man who was clean from heroin addiction.
Okay.
And then he relapsed after a really stressful encounter on the subway.
So it's like his body remembered the addiction even though his mind had moved on.
That's what it seems like. It's like his body held on to a physical memory of that addiction.
That's intense.
It makes you think, right? Like, how much do our past experiences, even the ones we've buried deep down, how much are those experiences still shaping us today?
That's a big question. And it makes me think about those times when, maybe you have a physical reaction to something and you don't know why.
And could our past be influencing our susceptibility to illnesses, too?
I've definitely wondered about that.
So then Chopra introduces this concept of the quantum body.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
This is where he really starts to challenge what most people think.
In what way?
He's basically suggesting that there's more to us than what we can perceive with our five senses.
So it's like there's this whole other dimension to our being.
Right, something beyond our ordinary perception.
Mm-hmm.
And he thinks this quantum body holds a lot of answers about healing.
It makes you think about how much we might be missing by limiting ourselves to just what we can see and touch.
Absolutely. And speaking of things beyond our senses, what about those altered states of consciousness?
Oh, yeah, he talks about that.
Like Chopra talks about this fourth state beyond waking, sleeping, and dreaming.
It's a concept rooted in those ancient Vedic traditions.
And it's actually pretty fascinating how this ancient idea seems to connect with modern research on meditation.
Oh, really? I didn't realize there was a connection.
Yeah. He mentions the work of Robert Keith Wallace. Have you heard of him?
I don't think so.
He did these studies, and he found that long-term meditators actually showed signs of aging more slowly.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
It makes you think maybe tapping into this fourth state could be the key to unlocking a whole new level of well-being.
That's a fascinating thought. And kind of empowering, too.
Yeah, like we have more control than we think.
Exactly.
And another interesting thing he talks about is the importance of understanding and managing our personal reality.
Our personal reality.
Yeah, that unique lens that each of us experiences the world through.
Right, our own individual perspective.
He shares this story about a young woman who was misdiagnosed with several different heart conditions.
Oh, wow.
And it makes you think about how deeply intertwined our beliefs and perceptions are with our actual physical experiences.
It's like our bodies might be trying to tell us something.
Yeah, almost like trying to communicate those beliefs outwardly. And if our personal reality is so powerful, then where does that leave conventional medicine?
That's a good question. It
Yeah.
really makes you think, right? About how our beliefs can shape our reality.
It's almost like our bodies are a reflection of our thoughts and beliefs.
Yeah, and if our personal reality is so powerful, where does that leave conventional medicine? It's a question Chopra grapples with.
So is he saying we should just ditch conventional medicine altogether and embrace quantum healing?
Well, not quite. He doesn't really pit one against the other,
Okay.
Instead, he seems to be suggesting a more integrated approach.
Taking the best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly. Recognizing the strengths of both conventional and alternative healing. Finding what works best for each individual.
I like that. So how does Chopra say we can tap into this quantum healing potential?
He circles back to some of those core principles we talked about before.
Like what?
Like the body's intelligence, that mind-body connection we were talking about, and the power of our thoughts and emotions.
It all ties together.
Right. But he doesn't just leave it at that.
Oh. So he offers some practical tools, too.
Yes. He suggests exploring those expanded states of awareness.
Okay, now we're getting into the how-to part.
Right. He talks about things like the primordial sound technique, which is an Ayurvedic technique.
Ayurvedic technique, okay.
And that aims to restore balance to the body's intelligence.
So he's taking these ancient practices and kind of connecting them to this cutting-edge science, like quantum physics.
Yeah, exactly. And through those connections, he's challenging us to really rethink our assumptions about healing, what it is and how it works. And, he even addresses some of the skepticism surrounding quantum healing head on.
Like what?
Well, for example, he talks about the whole controversy surrounding that experiment by Jacques Benveniste with the IgE antibodies.
Oh, right. The one where he claimed that water could retain a memory of substances even after they were removed.
That's the one. It caused a huge uproar in the scientific community, right?
Yeah, it did. A lot of controversy around that.
And the findings were later retracted because they couldn't be replicated.
Right, right.
But, I think it speaks to Chopra's willingness to at least explore these unconventional ideas, even if they challenge the established scientific norms.
Yeah, I mean, not all scientific breakthroughs have been met with open arms.
That's true.
He also talks about this concept of qualia. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. Qualia, those are those subjective, qualitative experiences that we have that make up our conscious awareness.
Okay, so like what kinds of experiences?
Well, think about the taste of chocolate or the feeling of love. Those are qualia.
Okay, so those hard-to-describe experiences.
Yes. And Chopra's point is that these aren't just some byproduct of our brains, but a fundamental aspect of reality.
So our subjective experiences are just as real as anything we can measure objectively.
That's what Chopra seems to be saying. And he even connects it to Ayurveda. He says that Ayurveda is a qualia medicine.
Qualia medicine.
Yeah, that it seeks to balance those subjective experiences to promote health and well-being.
So our inner world is just as important as our outer world.
Absolutely. And he shares more of those anecdotal stories.
I was wondering when we'd get back to those.
He talks about Aaron, who was diagnosed with a really serious blood disorder. Plastic anemia, I think it was.
That's a tough one. Didn't he refuse a bone marrow transplant?
He did. And instead, he embraced these Ayurvedic practices. Meditation, a really specific diet.
The whole 9 yards.
Exactly. And guess what? His blood count returned to normal.
Get out.
It's pretty amazing, right? Even if it doesn't perfectly align with what conventional medicine might have expected, it speaks to that incredible power our bodies have to heal. Even in really serious situations.
That's really something.
He also shares a really, well, I found it to be a really touching story about a baby who died of SIDS.
Oh, wow.
It was clearly a very profound experience for him, and he uses it to explore this interconnectedness between life and death,
Okay.
suggesting that our bodies and minds are constantly, I guess you could say, metabolizing experiences. And these experiences shape who we are at our core.
It's a beautiful way of looking at it, though a bit, bittersweet too. So where does he go from there?
Well, he then delves into the nature of consciousness itself.
Yeah.
He suggests that maybe, just maybe, consciousness isn't a product of our brains, but rather a fundamental aspect of reality.
So our consciousness isn't just something that arises from our physical brain, but is actually a fundamental force in the universe.
That seems to be what he's saying. And he draws this connection to the ancient Vedic sages. They talk about a fourth state of consciousness.
Right.
The one you can access through meditation. And he relates this to more modern scientific findings, like the research on the microbiome.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about that. Trillions of microorganisms living inside of us.
Exactly. And they play such a huge role in our health and well-being.
Who knew he had so many roommates?
Right. And, he uses that as another example of how these ancient traditions in modern science seem to be converging. Like we're on the verge of this massive shift in how we understand ourselves, the world around us.
It's exciting.
It is.
So how does Chopra say we can navigate this shift, especially when it comes to healing?
He emphasizes questioning our assumptions.
Yeah.
He acknowledges that we don't always have hard scientific evidence to back up everything we're learning about quantum healing.
Right.
But he says that our understanding of the universe is constantly evolving. What seems impossible today could be common knowledge tomorrow.
It's a good reminder to stay curious and open-minded.
Absolutely. And to be willing to consider that there might be more out there than what we currently accept as truth. He also challenges the whole idea of scientific reductionism.
Okay, what is that?
That's the idea that we can understand everything by breaking it down into its smallest parts.
Okay.
Chopra argues for a more holistic approach, one that considers the interconnectedness of everything.
I like that, looking at the whole picture.
Exactly. And then he throws out this really big idea that maybe the universe itself is conscious.
Whoa.
He brings up panpsychism, which is this idea that consciousness isn't just in us, but it's a fundamental property of the universe. It kind of makes you rethink your place in the grand scheme of things, doesn't it?
It really does.
So with all of these mind-bending concepts, you might be wondering if he offers any concrete ways to apply this to our lives.
I am. Give me the practical stuff.
He talks about managing our personal reality, being mindful of our thoughts and emotions, and really creating a lifestyle that supports our well-being. He even revisits those Ayurvedic practices again, things like that primordial sound technique,
Okay.
all as ways to potentially restore balance.
That makes sense.
He also stresses paying attention to those moments of expanded awareness, those times when we get a glimpse into something beyond our ordinary perceptions.
Like those aha moments, but on a much bigger scale.
Exactly. He calls those moments reality peeking through the iron grill. It's when we break free from those limitations of our minds.
It's like there's so much more to life than what we think.
Precisely. And Chopra seems to believe that we have the power to choose how much of that reality we let in. He then goes on to talk about DNA and how it plays into all of this.
Most people think of DNA as like a blueprint, pretty much set in stone.
Right. But he presents a different view.
What does he say?
He sees DNA as this dynamic system.
Okay.
something that's constantly interacting with our environment, and get this, our consciousness too. He even talks about picturing your DNA sped up so an entire lifetime flashes by in just minutes.
Whoa, that's kind of trippy.
I know, right? It challenges us to reconsider what DNA is capable of, this potential for change. He even suggests that it might be involved in how we perceive time and space.
Okay, now we're getting really out there.
I know.
So it's not just about physical healing here, but like a complete transformation.
Yeah, like a complete shift in how we see reality.
This is a lot to take in.
I know, right? And just when you think he's covered everything, he brings up the bliss technique. It's another one of those Ayurvedic practices.
Okay, and what's that about?
It's about accessing a state of pure awareness, like a wellspring of well-being.
And he thinks this state of bliss can lead to healing.
That's what he suggests. He uses this really interesting phrase, drowning disease in awareness.
That's powerful. It suggests we can overcome illness by tapping into those inner resources.
Exactly. And then he talks about the primordial sound technique again. And he says this technique can repair the breaks in our awareness.
What does he mean by breaks?
He's talking about those places where our DNA, our minds, and our bodies are not aligned.
So it's about getting everything back in sync.
Precisely. He even goes on to relate the primordial sound technique to the idea of superstrings in theics. You know, how everything is essentially vibration.
Okay, yeah.
It's like he's saying that both hinge on this fundamental idea of vibration as a fundamental part of reality.
It's incredible how he brings these seemingly unrelated fields together, like they're all pointing to the same underlying truth. And it seems like he's just getting started. What else does he explore?
Well, he dives into AIDS, which has obviously been a huge challenge for modern medicine.
Right, absolutely.
Chopra points out how the HIV virus is so good at aiding the immune system.
Yeah, it's really remarkable.
And he suggests that maybe conventional medicine has struggled because it's focused on the wrong level, you know.
Interesting. Instead of attacking the virus directly, he thinks we should be looking at something deeper.
You know, like addressing the underlying imbalances within the body's system, the things that let the virus thrive in the first place.
So it's less about fighting the virus head on and more about restoring harmony, getting the body back to a place where the virus can't survive.
Exactly. It's like instead of don't hate the player, hate the game, it's don't hate the virus, hate the imbalance.
I like that.
To illustrate this idea of restoring balance, Chopra brings up Shabda.
Shabda.
It's this ancient Vedic science of sound and vibration.
Okay, interesting. I'm not familiar with that one.
He suggests it might hold clues for healing that we haven't even begun to explore. He even talks about the work of Dr. Jeffrey A. Martin, who's been studying higher consciousness.
Okay.
And apparently Dr. Martin has identified specific locations of awareness that people can tap into.
So like a map of consciousness, showing us different states we can reach.
Yeah, something like that. It reminded me of that whole concept of the second attention that Chopra talks about, you know.
Right, that ability to perceive the forces shaping our lives that we usually don't notice.
It's like we can peek behind the curtain and see how the universe really works.
Yeah.
Chopra connects that second attention to those moments of expanded awareness.
Those glimpses into a larger reality, like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible when it comes to consciousness and healing.
That's a really good way to put it. And Chopra seems to believe we all have this untapped potential within us.
We just have to figure out how to unlock it. So with all of these mind-blowing ideas, how does Chopra wrap it all up? What's the takeaway for someone who wants to explore quantum healing?
He brings it back to those core principles we talked about. The connection between the mind, body, and spirit, and the importance of tapping into deeper levels of awareness. He reminds us that true healing isn't just about getting rid of physical symptoms, but about addressing the root cause.
It's about recognizing that we are so much more than just our physical bodies. Our thoughts, emotions, energy, all of it plays a role.
Exactly. And don't forget about meditation.
Oh, right. He talks a lot about that.
He really emphasizes it as a way to access those deeper levels of awareness, connecting it to that concept of turiya, that fourth state of consciousness, a more expansive way of being.
So it sounds like Chopra is advocating for a completely different way of approaching our health.
It's definitely a different way of thinking about things. And, you know, whether you agree with all of his ideas or not, I think he really challenges us to rethink our assumptions about who we are, what healing really means, what's possible.
This deep dive into quantum healing has certainly given me a lot to think about. What about you? What really stood out to you from our conversation?
You know, it's how Chopra brings all these different ideas together. Ancient wisdom, Modern science, personal stories. He even throws in some philosophy.
Huh.
It's pretty remarkable, actually.
It's true, he covers a lot of ground in this book. And he doesn't shy away from the fact that some people are skeptical.
Right.
But he still encourages us to consider that what we believe has a real impact on our lives, even on our health and well-being.
Absolutely. And he leaves us with this really thought-provoking question. What if we have way more power to heal than we think we do? That's definitely something to ponder.
It really is. And to our listeners, we want to hear from you. What resonated with you? Did anything surprise you? Where do you find yourself agreeing with Chopra, and where do you disagree? And most importantly, how can you apply these concepts to your own life? Can you find ways to cultivate greater well-being, a deeper understanding of yourself, and maybe even a new perspective on the world around you? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.